It's not exactly how Bhavna Gupta imagined her wedding day. In Cardiff this morning, her fiancé Jordan Cuff holds on to cardboard cutouts of her parents and brother. Quarantine requirements spoiled their travel plans. Another limit meant only 10 attending. So how did they feel about today's announcement of yet more restrictions to come in the form of a second national lockdown in Wales?
I think if it's what stops the virus spreading, then I think it's necessary, really.
It kind of does need to happen, I think, because things aren't getting any better, so I think we can understand why they would implement one.
Across the UK, autumn heralds more divisive arguments over notions of national lockdowns. Too crude is the view from Downing Street, too important not to deploy, says the Labour government in Cardiff, where today the First Minister spoke of the need for a short, sharp shock to turn back the clock. Otherwise, the NHS, he claimed, could be overwhelmed.
A firebreak period is our best chance of regaining control of the virus and avoiding a much longer and much more damaging national lockdown. The window we have within which to act is only a small one. And to be successful, we need everybody's help. Here in Wales, this is the moment to come together.
It will be similar to the last national lockdown in Wales, with much stricter measures than seen elsewhere currently in the UK. From 6 p.m. on Friday until Monday the 9th of November, people in Wales will be required to stay at home. They must work from home unless they're essential workers or in a job where it's not possible. Hospitality, leisure and non-essential retail must close. So too libraries, recycling centres and places of worship, other than for funerals or weddings. And there's a ban on all indoor and outdoor gatherings with people not in the same household or support bubble. Primary schools and special schools will reopen after half-term, as will secondary schools, but only for years 7 and 8. Has he done the right thing?
No.
Why not?
I just opened I worked there for 15 years in a cafe in there, so I just bought it and opened it myself, and now we got a lockdown again.
The figures are going up rapidly, aren't they? You can see the figures in Cardiff and elsewhere in South Wales. They're jumping all the time. This will give you a bit of a break from the virus spreading at a rapid pace.
Kasim Ali, who owns tea rooms in Cardiff, welcomes Mark Drakeford's promise of a new £300 million fund for firms affected. But he worries that the new UK-wide furlough replacement scheme won't be enough for many out of work.
One thing that does stand out is the furlough scheme of the new furlough scheme of 67% for staff. And, you know, in our industry, we're on national living wage effectively, so 67% of that. It's a central government issue, you know, it needs to be decided by the Chancellor, but that's something of great concern.
That it's a national lockdown in Wales does not have the support of the Welsh Conservatives. Look at the map, they say. The rates of new COVID cases are highest in parts of South and North Wales, much of which is already under local lockdown, but there are big regional differences. Take Cardiff, which currently has an incidence rate of 267 per 100,000 people, compared to Ceredigion, which has a rate of just 25.
Well, I'm certainly not convinced that this is the right thing to do. We haven't seen proper information or data from the Welsh Government to say that this is the right thing to do, and you have to question whether this is proportionate, because they are now looking to force businesses to close over a period of just over 2 weeks. And if you look at my constituency, for example, businesses in my constituency where the virus is very, very low will have to close over that period, and I therefore question whether this is proportionate.
Plaid Cymru described the firebreak as a last resort, only for an emergency, adding, "We're now in that emergency."
And Andy Davis joins us now from Cardiff. Andy, a big decision for Mark Drakeford today.
Certainly was, John, and designed specifically to coincide with the half-term to maximise the impact of this lockdown. Comes on the day that Northern Ireland schools are beginning a 2-week closure. The decision to try to keep more children in school in Wales inevitably has meant tighter restrictions in other parts of life here. One key area of confusion emerging tonight is involving support for workers, because from the 1st of November, they will be eligible for the UK government's new job support scheme. But the question is, what happens in the first week of the lockdown before that kicks in? And the Welsh Government are claiming that they've asked the Treasury to bring that scheme forward by a week. The Treasury has said for various reasons, timescale, delivery reasons, that simply isn't possible. But what we could be looking at now is a situation where companies in Wales are facing one support scheme one week, another the next week, with inevitable complications, and questions tonight about who precisely will be eligible for that first week, support in the first week, given the current rules.
And briefly, Andy, what happens next?
Well, very interestingly, it's about compliance. A report from the Welsh Government's Technical Advisory Group tonight said if this lockdown is adhered to as strictly as the last, then it could set back the pandemic here by 28 days. But this is a really different atmosphere now, isn't it, with a national debate about strategy riven by political tensions. What they have said is that whatever emerges in Wales after this lockdown, there will have to be simpler, clearer national guidelines on behaviour. What that will be has yet to be seen. But as of Friday from 6 p.m, Wales, it's back to the stay-at-home message for all.
Andy Davis, thank you. Short time ago, I spoke to Mark Drakeford, and I began by asking him why he was imposing a national lockdown in Wales.
Numbers are up in all parts of Wales, and the rate of rise is accelerating away from us. We're already seeing the impact in our hospitals and indeed over this weekend in our critical care beds. The advice we have from our Chief Medical Officer and others is that if we don't act to turn the tide back now, we're in for some very, very difficult days later in the autumn.
How can you justify then a lockdown on an area like Powys where cases remain very low?
There are parts of Wales where we have worked very hard to protect them from the virus that is spreading elsewhere, but the gap between those areas and the rest of Wales has been narrowing for the last 10 days. It will not be long before they too are above the 50 threshold, and we need them as part of this great national effort we are asking people in Wales to provide. All people and all parts of Wales need to be part of that effort.
Why have you decided to go it alone and not wait for the UK government to take this decision?
Well, I don't detect any appetite in the UK government to follow the advice of SAGE, which has been saying for many weeks now that a circuit breaker period is the most likely course of action to turn back the virus. And we were very keen to have our half-term as one of the 2 weeks of the firebreak period to minimise the impact on the education of our children.
And as we speak now, how much peril is the Welsh NHS in?
Well, we have over 800 people in hospital beds in Wales today suffering directly from coronavirus. That was 500 only 2 weeks ago. We are seeing more people now becoming seriously ill and in our critical care beds. We want the NHS to be able to respond to the range of things that people need to draw on it for their personal circumstances. And if we don't act now, then coronavirus will be the only thing that the health service in Wales will be able to deal with, and it'll be struggling to do even that.
Finally, First Minister, this massive social disruption and complete alteration of people's daily lives, is this what we're in for now for the foreseeable future?
Well, our ambition is to take this action now so that we can get through to Christmas without needing to repeat this sort of very severe disruption to people's lives. Beyond that, into the new year, I'm just having to be clear with people. I can't give any guarantees about being able to avoid further action again then. We think by acting now we can get through to Christmas. Beyond that, I'm afraid nobody can offer guarantees of how collectively we may still need to act together to protect one another and to save people's lives.
First Minister Mark Drakeford, thank you very much indeed for talking to us.
Thank you.